On a brisk January afternoon in 1919, Boston bustled with a hum of post-war optimism. The city, cloaked in a layer of snow and soot, was alive with industry and a renewed sense of prosperity. Dockworkers along the North End wharf barked orders over the roar of trains. Children bundled in woolen coats scurried through the alleys, their laughter rising like steam in the cold air. All seemed normal. But something strange was happening at 529 Commercial Street. A massive, ironclad molasses tank, owned by the United States Industrial Alcohol Company, had started to groan. Standing just a few yards away, 27-year-old Frank Dalton, a teamster who hauled molasses barrels for the company, was loading empty casks onto his wagon. He wiped his brow and looked up at the tank, a towering 50-foot-high structure holding over 2 million gallons of thick, dark syrup. It shimmered in the weak afternoon sunlight. Frank had worked around the tank for years, and like most of the workers, he knew it wasn't entirely trustworthy. It hissed sometimes, and in the summer, it leaked molasses from its rivets like dark tears. But no one believed it would ever break. Not really. Down the street, Maria Donovan was preparing soup in her kitchen. Her family's apartment overlooked the wharf, and the scent of garlic and onions wafted through the windows as she stirred the pot. Her 8-year-old son, Tommy, sat at the window, watching horses pull carts along the cobblestones. Maria wiped her hands on her apron and glanced toward the tank. The metallic groaning was louder today, and it made her stomach twist. Something felt wrong. At that moment, John Barry, the watchman for the molasses tank, was on patrol. He was an aging man, weathered by years of factory work. John had reported noises coming from the tank several times before, but his concerns were often dismissed. He paused, hand resting on a rusty pipe, and listened. A deep, rumbling vibration pulsed beneath his feet. Then, without warning, there was a sound like a gunshot, then another and another. Rivets burst from the tank like bullets. The explosion came next. A deafening roar erupted through the streets as the tank split open. A wall of molasses, 25 feet high and moving at over 30 miles per hour, surged into the north end. The syrup, hot from fermentation and internal pressure, moved like a wave of death. Horses were swallowed instantly, carts reduced to splinters. The force lifted a nearby train off its tracks and flung it like a toy. Steel girders from an elevated railway twisted as if made of straw. Frank Dalton heard the thunderous noise and turned too late. The wall of molasses slammed into him, lifting him from his wagon. He struggled in the thick syrup, arms flailing, lungs burning. Then silence. Maria screamed as the windows blew in. She grabbed Tommy and ran for the back door, but the floor gave way beneath her. The molasses surged through the apartment, sweeping furniture, pots, and people into a chaotic, sticky whirlpool. She managed to lift Tommy onto a floating tabletop. Her hands slipped. The syrup pulled her under. Across the street, Officer Michael Wallace had just finished his patrol shift and was lighting a cigarette when he saw the wall of molasses tearing through the streets. He dropped everything and rushed toward the sound of screams. He pulled a man from a heap of wreckage, then another. Hours passed. The cries became fewer. The sun dipped below the skyline, casting long shadows over a neighborhood buried in syrup. By nightfall, Boston was silent. The next morning, the city woke to a strange, pungent scent. Reporters called it a molasses flood, but the devastation was anything but sweet. Rescuers waded through knee-deep syrup, searching for survivors. Horses that hadn't drowned were shot to end their suffering. Volunteers used axes, shovels, and even flamethrowers to break through the hardened layers of molasses. Every movement was slow, painful, and surreal. A makeshift morgue was set up in a nearby school. Among the dead was Frank Dalton, found crushed beneath a cart. Maria Donovan's body was recovered 3 days later, arms still outstretched. Miraculously, Tommy survived. Officer Wallace never spoke of what he saw in the wreckage. The death toll rose to 21, with more than 150 injured. Cleanup took weeks. Boston residents tracked molasses through the streets, onto trolley cars, into their homes. The scent lingered for decades. Lawsuits followed. The United States Industrial Alcohol Company was forced to pay over $600,000 in damages, but no criminal charges were filed. Investigations revealed poor construction, substandard steel, and rushed production. But no amount of blame could erase the tragedy. The Great Boston Molasses Flood became a cautionary tale, a sticky reminder that negligence, no matter how sweet it smells, has a price. Years later, Tommy Donovan grew up and became a fireman. Every January 15th, he'd visit the spot where the tank once stood. He never told his children what happened that day, but he always brought flowers. And on quiet winter nights when the wind blew just right, some claimed they could still smell molasses in the air.